So far we've been using Notepad++, and so I want to introduce you to a new editor, which is a little bit more fun to use, but I think you've earned it at this point. So we're going to go to, if you do a search for Visual Studio Code, it's going to pull up this page. Now this is a Microsoft product. Visual Studio Code is free, so we can download it from the website. And it's not to be confused with Visual Studio, which is a much heavier version of an editor than what we're dealing with here with Visual Studio Code. So make sure you see the difference between the two. This is Visual Studio Code, and it's free, and you can download it from Microsoft's website. Just do a Google search for Visual Studio Code. You'll come up to a page that looks like this, and it's compatible with both the Mac and the Windows machine, so either one will get you Visual Studio Code, and then obviously download and install from there. One thing that Visual Studio Code comes out of the box with, well, here's Visual Studio Code, but I wanted to show you something else. So is something called Emmet, and I'm going to show you Emmet in this video as well. So Emmet is a way for, it's a tool that allows us to shortcut, to do things much quicker than doing it manually by hand. And I'll show you what I mean by that, but let me at least get you to the website so you know where to find more documentation, and then I'll show you how Emmet works. So this is a great place to go, emmet.io, and then if you go into the documentation and scroll down to the cheat sheet, this is a great place for you to visit to learn more about some of the shortcut commands that you can use with Emmet. So I'm going to show you some of the simple ones, and then you can come here and refer to some of the more complex ones. Just kind of we'll just do it together. So here's a cheat sheet that you can come to, and I'll show you how it all works. So let me show you them combined together. So this is what will happen when you first open up Visual Studio Code, and obviously there's a welcome screen with your most current work and so forth. None of that should be too daunting at this point. I'm going to close that out. Now what I want you to start thinking about is, instead of opening up just individual files like you do in Notepad++, now we're going to think about opening up all those files. They're contained in a single folder, right? So if instead we choose Open Folder, and we choose the folder where our, I forgot what my folder was called. I think it was, sorry, Visual Studio Code Demo. There we go. And in this folder is where I'm going to hold all of the files that pertain to this particular web page or assignment or project. And so now that I have Visual Studio Code open and I have the folder, I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call this one index.html. All right, so you can see that it's showing up right here. So if I created a CSS page, styles.css, the nice thing about this too is it's very easy for me to pull these side by side. So now I can see my style sheet next to my index page, and that's really cool. We don't need this right here. All right, so the next part is, that's pretty straightforward. So we're thinking about things in terms of folders instead of just individual files. I'm going to close out my style sheet, and so here's what Emmet offers us. If I wanted to create a new HTML page, then I would have to write all of that structure, the beginning structure that you are getting so accustomed to. But Emmet allows us the ability to type in what are shortcuts. So you can see the word Emmet abbreviation. So Emmet is kicking into place, meaning that it gives me shortcuts. So you're telling me if I type in HTML:5, whoa, all of that stuff is already input for you. So it shortcuts things that you are, you've kind of done the long way. So let's say, here's some other examples. Let's say I wanted to create a div. So if I'm going to create a div and I need an ID equals container, we've done all this before. This takes kind of a lot of work. Container, okay, great. There's my open closing container. But what you can do using Emmet is, again, a shortcut. So if I did div and I did the hashtag and I wanted the ID to be container and I hit tab, you can see that it's going to fill those things in for me. And so similar, if I do image, you'll start to see that if I hit tab, I think it was just image, oh, here's my example and I'm failing, image tab, there we go. So just img tab, Emmet says, oh, you want a source and an alt, so it fills those things in for me. Same thing with a class. So if I needed a paragraph with a class of swim, tab, it's filling these things in for me. Now this is just a very small portion of what Emmet can do, which is why I was having you go look at that cheat sheet. So the only thing that I don't have access to, or one of the cool things, kind of both sides of the swords here, is I don't have that option where I can just view it in a browser. So Visual Studio gives us the ability to install what we call packages, meaning I can do all kinds of add-ons to make this more personalized for my personal use. So if you see these icons on the left-hand side, there's this one at the bottom that says extensions. And extensions gives me the ability to add things that I don't already have support for. For example, I teach the C++ class, so there's some support for C++. But more importantly, is this open in browser. So let's say I didn't have it. I'm going to uninstall it so that way we can do it together. And so what will happen is, let's see if I can get rid of it all together so we don't have it. Okay, it's still showing up here, so I need to reboot this in order to open and close it again. But let's say I didn't have it here in my, these are the current projects I have, or extensions that I have, and then down here are tons of extensions that I can add to this to make my browser more useful for the things that I want to use it for. So if I wanted to find one, I could do a search up here. I'm going to do preview in browser because Visual Studio Code doesn't come inherent with one. And then I have the option, there's lots of different packages. So these are just open source packages that other people have written for Visual Studio Code. And so I can click on these and I'll get more information about how to use that package. Here's the one that this is the one I like. And it shows me how to use it. It tells me more information about it and so forth. And so then I can install it. And then once it's installed, it'll show up in my, well, they're calling it extensions, but packages, the same kind of thing. So once it's installed, there it's installed. And so let's just see that's installed. Here's my ones that are installed. Oh, let's undo that so I can have them all. There we go. So now we can see that it's installed. I've also installed one to print because you don't really have a print command inherent in Visual Studio Code. So there's lots of things that you can add on to, and certainly out of the scope of this particular video. But the point being that if I wanted to now, I'm going to go back to Explore, so where these double pages are, so that way I can go back to my code. And I right click on the name, now I'll see open in default browser or open in other browsers, which is an option I didn't have before. So that is an add-on that enables me to view in a browser where I didn't have it before. So there's lots of different extensions, and you might hear extensions in different videos or different things that are installed, and this is where you're getting them from. So this is a quick overview of Visual Studio Code. It's a great thing to get yourself thrown into something a little bit more complex, a little bit more fancy, a little bit more fun to work with than Notepad++. And so that's why I'm introducing it to you in this chapter.